We continue to unravel the complication that is healthcare. Seth Denson, president and co-founder of GDP Advisors, joins me right now to answer that question. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
First and foremost, you were telling me that the big takeaway today is that we all need to be more educated. And you were giving me some facts and figures that just blew my mind. And I want you to listen to these. How much time we spend on choosing healthcare and researching healthcare versus a TV or a car.
That's right. So healthcare is obviously a huge financial driver for most families. If we think through the family P&L, so to speak, their profit and loss statements, healthcare is up there. But on average, the average American spends about 15 hours when they're researching things like a car, or 2 hours on researching things like a television before they buy it. But when it comes to healthcare, on average about 15 minutes before we actually do something about it.
Yeah, let that sink in for a second. So we want to know, though, can this be flipped, so to speak? I mean, now that this decision has come down, I know there's a stay right now. What does this mean, not politically, but as far as for the consumer down the road?
Well, right now, nothing. So the Affordable Care Act obviously had massive impact on where most people get their health insurance. About half of Americans get it through a government-funded program like Medicare or Medicaid, and the other half get it mostly through their employers. And so the Affordable Care Act had a lot of impact on all of that, and right now that just is continuing. But what could happen in the future is massive. The Affordable Care Act primarily focused on the insurance industry. What the problem is that insurance has just become the financing mechanism for the health care industry. So when I go in and get a procedure done at a hospital or a surgical center or an imaging center, that is financed through health care premiums or health insurance premiums. And so unfortunately, Americans oftentimes think of the two synonymously, right? Health insurance and health care is the same thing, and they're not. We need to think of them kind of like our house and our mortgage. They are the financing of the other.
But they're two separate.
Absolutely.
Okay, so moving forward, what do you expect to see happen as far as, let's say they were, politically, we're kind of at a stalemate on a lot of things, as most people would agree on that. What does this mean moving forward? Could they come up with a change?
Well, they're going to have to do something, right? This is just not sustainable. In the 10 years leading up to the Affordable Care Act, healthcare costs went up about 138%, while inflation was roughly 28% during that same time. And that's just continued since the Affordable Care Act. The problem is, as I mentioned earlier, the Affordable Care Act was all about health insurance. So until we start to drive down the cost of health care, nothing's going to change. So politically, we're coming into a new year where Congress is going to be very divided. And the Trump administration can only do certain things through executive order, and nobody really wants the courts to start legislating this. So what happens with this recent ruling out of Fort Worth is anybody's guess. I tend to think that it gets thrown out. I don't think that necessarily the constitutionality structure has changed based on what Congress did last year, which is why it got ruled that it was unconstitutional. So I think that it will stay in place in the long term once it gets through the appellate courts and the Supreme Court, which is in large part, I think, why they're saying nothing's changing in the meantime.
Okay, Seth, thank you so very much. Just a quick mention, you've got a book coming out. I want you to tell people what it is in case they want to learn more.
Yeah, thank you. So a blueprint for solving America's healthcare crisis, called The Cure, a blueprint for solving America's healthcare crisis, will be out later this quarter. And it's really what the government needs to do to solve healthcare, not single payer, not Medicare for all, but a combination of multiple things that we can do society-wise to solve healthcare here.
All right. Thank you, Seth. We appreciate it.